Life Audio.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer. We'll start the conversation with Peggy and her guests next.
The best-selling illustrative Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
This is Perseus Poku, host of the Sound Reasoning Ministry podcast. Learn how to share and defend your faith by listening to us weekly. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com. Here's Peggy Ployer.
Today we're going to talk about science beyond the textbook for diverse learners. And my guests today are Luke and Tricia Gilkerson. Welcome you two to the show. I'm so excited to share with you today.
Good being here, Peggy. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love talking about science. I was talking with Luke and Tricia ahead of time. That's what my degree is in. Passion within our homeschooling. And my oldest graduated and is now a biomedical engineer. And so science has always been something that I love talking about. And I'm excited that they're going to share with us today just how to make science more accessible. Because sometimes that's a really difficult topic to bridge. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, just know that you can put your comments, your questions in the feed. We would love to include those in the conversation. And I know some of you have, actually, we had one guest or one person from our community already drop a question into the portal that we created for being able to have a question ahead of time submitted. So we'll be addressing that within our conversation too. So, So Luke and Tricia, I would love for our audience just to get to know you a little bit and a little about your story and what makes you so passionate about this topic. And we'll just kind of kick it off from there.
It all began with a boy and a dream. It was, she and I have always really enjoyed the sciences, each in our own respective, fields of interest. For me, I grew up kind of the astronomy nerd. I loved astronomy since I was like a fetus, and just absolutely loved the, not just the scientific aspects of it in terms of being able to look through a telescope and be able to understand what I'm seeing, but even just the way that astronomy connected to history and folklore of different cultures and that kind of stuff. Yeah. I loved all those kind of things. Tricia, though, her background is in
I've got a degree in biology, and then I had all the chemistry and the physics and all of those sciences in college to go along with it, and just loved it all. I'm one of those weird girls who loved all of the sciences.
All the stuff.
And just loved learning about those things. And What got us really passionate, though, about sharing our love of those things with other people and teaching to kids was, and I was telling you before we started, we were speaking at homeschool conferences, and we were actually talking more on parenting issues at that point than we were anything to do with science. And people would come up to our booth afterwards and they'd talk to us, and, we just have these great conversations. And we talked to people in our co-op that we were involved in our, local homeschool community. And everybody would say, I love homeschooling, but I don't think I can do it once my kids reach middle school or once my kids reach high school. And I'd say, well, why is that? And nearly all the time people would say, I can't really give my kids a solid education in the sciences. I can cover English and I can cover history, but I can't do high school biology. I can't do chemistry. I can't do physics. And I'm going to have to put my kids in. And Luke and I were like, no, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You can have just as good of an education at home in those subjects, if not even better.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think especially it's because a lot of the lab sciences or the lab aspects of the sciences can be very intimidating to parents.
Exactly.
And it is. I mean, if you've never done a lab before, or your memory of doing a science lab was back when you were in high school and you had to dissect a fetal pig or something, and that freaks you out, and you're like, how in the world am I ever going to lead that with my kids at home?
Right.
I didn't like doing it then. How am I going to like doing it now?
Or trying to adapt some of those bigger chemistry labs or physics. How do you adapt those for home? That can be intimidating.
Yeah. So for us, it was, we feel like we can figure out how to scale those classroom type activities down into a homeschool setting and have them be just as impactful, just as meaningful. So really a lot of what we do now is kind of centered around that.
Okay. Yeah. And that, those high school years, I'm having taught high school with my own kids. Yeah. They are the most precious years. Those are the years you don't want to lose because you've worked so hard, with your student for all those years. That's when the payoff comes, and really they just start exploding in their learning. And when you do put them in more of an institutionalized school, that kind of shuts that down a bit. And I mean, it's not going to be the best choice for everybody, but if that's your, the fence you're sitting on and that's the tipping point, then we're thankful for people like you that come along and say, no, there's a way we can get around this obstacle.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience, I can say, I think our favorite with our own kids has been bringing them up through the high school years with our oldest just graduated a year ago, and our next is in there now, and we've got a lot of younger kids, but we love the conversations that happen in the high school years.
Yeah,
because their level of learning and comprehension just goes to it's just a whole new level. Right. And I would take that any day over teaching kids how to read cat or dog or, any day. I'd love those high school conversations.
Yes. Well, and you've invested in it, when you teach the cat and the dog, and all the other things. That's the investment, and the payoff really comes in those high school years when you start seeing, them take all those basics, those fundamentals that you've taught them, and really just make them their own. And that's kind of scary when we're looking at subjects that, especially for parents who go, I just barely made it through that, biology or chemistry or physics, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. And now you want me to teach it? So yes, a little scary, but promise, hold on. So Luke and Tricia have some ideas for you. So, as we're getting started, what are the problems with a textbook only approach to science?
I think the biggest thing is that science should be such an experiential subject. Mm-hmm. There are so many ways to experience science. We talk about labs, but even things like just observing nature walks, and the field trips you can go on. And so anytime you're doing science with just a book, it's not really going to engage your students. And science can also be very, there's a lot of very cool visually stimulating elements to science that if you can bring video in, that can really help bring that subject alive as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of kids, you throw a textbook in front of their face, they just kind of zone out.
Yes, especially if they're a very kinesthetic learner or an auditory learner, and you've just got this text in front of them. Their eyes glaze over pretty fast, even in high school when they're supposed to have a longer attention span. Yes. So yes, that just makes a lot of sense. So talk a little bit about how much fun science can be when you use different modes of learning instead of just that textbook approach.
Well, I think, like Tricia was saying, if you're not the, obviously I wouldn't say every parent should be up front lecturing their kids on science, but if you can use video elements, so finding visual elements. So right now, for instance, we are developing a course in physics. It's nearly impossible to talk about what physics is with just words on the page.
Oh yeah.
You need to be able to see things like motion and friction and momentum and these you need to be able to see what those things actually are.
To really understand it.
Yeah, and especially for the sake of application. I mean, how many times do we get in subjects of school, like, when am I ever going to use this? That's the question you get. When am I ever going to use this?
Right. Oh, yeah. Our kids are good at asking that one.
and in the sciences, all the very practical applications of science are used in the teaching of science. When we teach science, especially using, for instance, visual elements like video, or even just through audio cues within videos, those kind of things. When you're teaching them, or when you're using a curriculum to help you teach it, then it's going to be giving you all the practical applications in the midst of the learning, because it's saying things like, if you're, for instance, if you're going down a highway and you are about to take a turn, how fast can you take that turn before friction doesn't work anymore and you skid off the road? Well, that's a practical application of physics. But the thing is that teaches them, when they're going down the road and they see that sign that says, here's the speed limit on this turn, they know where that comes from. They know that's not just a random thing that someone threw up there. Someone said, if you go faster than that, they did the calculations and they figured out, if you go faster than that, there could be problems here. And it helps them understand the world that they see all around them all the time. I mean, that's just an example.
After a word from our sponsor, we'll dive back into this conversation. The best-selling illustrated Bible for kids and teens, the Action Bible, is now better than ever. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is an interactive Bible specifically created for kids and teens ages 7 to 15. The Faith in Action Edition is designed to engage young readers in God's Word through hundreds of vividly illustrated Bible stories in chronological order with activities and games. Readers will grow in God's Word by using QR codes, providing free access to over 2,000 devotionals, hundreds of prayers, character stories, teaching videos, maps, timelines, and much more. Additionally, the Action Bible Faith in Action Edition allows readers to explore the major themes of the Bible like courage, faith, hope, love, service, trust, and wisdom. Each theme provides practical advice on how to live out God's Word. The Action Bible Faith in Action Edition is the best interactive Bible you can purchase for your child or teen. Purchase your copy today at Sam's Club, Barnes & Noble, or Amazon.
This is Chris Christensen, and back in 2006, I started a simple project. A project to try and introduce more people to the Bible through Bible study called the Bible Study Podcast. It's a simple name and a simple idea. Each week, every week, we study one chapter of the Bible, talk about what it says, and what that might mean for us today. To listen now, go to lifeaudio.com or search for the Bible Study Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.
You were mentioning modes of learning. For sure, read alouds. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, we've come in contact and interfaced with a lot of kids that struggle with reading or struggle, even some of them read great, but they struggle with comprehending what they're reading.
Right.
And
science has so many words, vocabulary words that are brand new.
But I don't think that means you have to completely ditch books altogether. I think utilizing those living books as read alouds with your kids, especially when they've got pictures, can be a really great way to do that. Audio versions of textbooks. We've got a lot of students that use audio versions of textbooks with a lot of success to help reinforce some of those concepts.
Right.
But, if you're using video, you can pull some videos from YouTube. YouTube's got some great content that you can grab. We're studying friction. We'll go to YouTube and do a search, and you can find some great things. And then go to your library and find some great books on it.
Yeah.
And then other modes of learning, especially hands-on type things, kinesthetic learners, hands-on stuff is pretty, it's you really can't sacrifice it when it comes to science.
Yeah.
The sciences, the kids learn much better when they can, and that's, I would even say that's regardless of just all the different learning styles or even learning abilities or disabilities. We're talking about that every child benefits from seeing something in application that they've set in motion themselves, whether that's mixing chemicals together to see how the colors change, whether that's dissecting an animal, whether that's going into, whether that's, building a ramp and putting a car down the ramp and timing it and seeing how the laws of physics apply.
Those lessons are so memorable. And
when
we've got those experiences, we can really hang some of those lessons we learned onto those experiences. And, I feel like even as adults, if you think back to your, high school or junior high science, what do you remember? Do you remember what the textbook said? Hopefully you remember some of those concepts, but the things that you're really going to remember are experiences you had and things that you did.
Right.
Yeah. And scientifically, that's been proven that we do. Those are the memories that we will recall the quickest, is the ones that we've been able to have an experience with. And then, like you said, hinging the new learning, because you're in science, you're always building off of one concept to another. And so those are able to be useful and recalled quickly when we have an experience to go with them. So
for sure.
Sense to get a little bit out of that textbook and to make sure those hands-on or different modes of learning happen. So is there a way to overcome writing difficulties when maybe you're teaching a lab or something that would allow, has them recording information or just having to put together a concise summary of what they've done? A lot of students, parents will scribe for them. Do you have any other ideas when parents are like, I really need my child to be an independent learner?
Sure.
And scribing for your kids, sometimes that's what you got to do.
Yes, yep, exactly.
And doing some of that can be very helpful. I know one of the things that we've seen a lot of parents or a lot of students find success with is when they have some sort of guided note taking. Where, maybe there's an outline, and if the curriculum doesn't provide it that you're using it, maybe you can get a full outline where you can take certain pieces of it out. And as the students, reading or watching a video, they can fill those blanks in.
Right.
And we found that to be something incredibly helpful for a lot of students. To just kind of see, this is where we're going. And, or if note taking altogether is difficult, to just have those outlines available so they can work through it and they can have those notes available.
It's funny. We in the courses we've taught, we have seen more than simply, for instance, if like a student needs to study for an upcoming test or something like that. more than just giving them a review of the material that's going to be on the test, students need to know how to take notes, how to study.
Yes.
And so we've actually started providing our own lectures in our courses on how to take notes, how to study for a test, that kind of stuff. Because too many students, and this is all students, don't even know the basics of how their mind works best in order to do those things.
I didn't know how to study appropriately until I was out of college.
Right.
I mean, I really, it took until I was out of college and had read books on it. And I was like, oh, I probably could have done that a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
It's not about opening a book and just reading the same thing over and over, but training your kids to do things like to quiz themselves, to make their own flashcards, to see, can I actually recall that information?
Right.
Not do I recognize the information?
Because that's that's what we get in. Unfortunately, when it comes to whether that's them, we're talking about writing, right? So if their ability, for instance, just like let's say they struggle with being able to write out information that they're learning or whatever. Often when they go back to those notes, first of all, even just the act of taking notes helps them retain the information in the first place, even if they never read the notes again. But then in the act of going back to those notes, too often kids, Tricia just mentioned this, that they mistake recognition for recall. And what that means is that they are quizzing themselves on something and they say, oh, what's that answer again? And then they look down at the textbook or they look down at their notes and they look at that and they say, oh yeah, I knew that. But no, you didn't know that. No,
right.
You didn't.
Yes, now you do.
Recognize that on the page because you've seen that before, because you wrote that before, but that's not the same thing as recall. Recall should be able to recall things, spontaneously from some sort of a question or a prompting of some kind. But that's not the same kind of thing. So helping kids to think about how does their mind really work? And as parents, you know how your child's mind individually works, but even just generally speaking, how do human brains work? Just being equipped with a knowledge of, okay, this is how to study. This is how to take notes. This is how to successfully work through material in a way that will help the information to really stick. Parents need to kind of be equipped with that information. And if they don't know that information themselves, like we didn't know, even in college or whatever, they need to learn that information or find good curricula that teaches that kind of information.
Right.
That are kind of meta skills, not just skills that are like, how am I learning this scientific topic? But are you teaching your kids learning skills at all? How to learn. How to learn.
Exactly. Because that's what they really need to know. When it's all said and done, yes, we've been through all the topics, but you still keep learning through life. And that's, underground what we're training as we homeschool them. And, I remember one of my guests calling it sticky learning. It's just that, we think we're going to remember something the first time and we have to see something. I don't know how many times it's been proven in order for it to stick. And so yes, but those study methods will help those things stick. But we just, we can't, like Tricia, you said, we can't just read it once and expect that it's just going to stick unless we have something to anchor it to. So say a previous experience. So when you read that, all of a sudden that anchor just hooks. But you don't know when that's going to happen for when you're reading through a textbook or something. And that's going to be different for every individual because of their learning experiences. So
for our oldest son, few years ago, we had him tested for ADHD. Ends up that that's something that he has. And at first, when we were just approaching him about, hey, I'd like to go get some assessments on this just to see what if there's something that you might struggle with, and he was totally not for it at all. He was like, no, I don't want to do that. That sounds dumb.
I don't want to label.
I don't want to label. I don't whatever. But after he did it, and after we went through the assessment, and after the doctor started talking to him about, so here's what to expect and here's what to do or whatever it is, all of a sudden he was empowered to know how he learned best because he understood himself, right? He understood how he's wired. And therefore he's like, okay, so I know when it comes to taking a test or sitting down to even just focus on.
And now all of a sudden he wanted to know, he was like interested, like, do you think there's like a podcast I could listen to or like that'll tell me like how my brain works? So,
and now he just devours that kind of stuff all the time. And so for us, and of course every kid, and as homeschool parents, every kid is different in terms of how they learn and everything. So knowing how your kid's wired and them knowing how they're wired helps them to advance in any subject.
Yes.
And
whether it's science or not.
Right. Yeah. And when it comes back to like the writing that we were talking about when we first started this question, it's, some students are going to need those scaffolding questions like you were talking about, those prompts. And some students might not need them. But if that's something your student needs, don't feel like you're cheating by giving them those things because you're not. And I hope that you understand that every student's going to be different. But what you want is for them to get the right answer and for them to be able to put out the information that they really know inside that can't come out because they don't have either they haven't kind of worked through that skill set of being able to process it without those prompts, and eventually they will get there, or maybe they just realize that is something I'm going to need long term as I'm going through this. But executive functioning, it just seems like so many parents, when we have a broadcast on executive functioning, we have way more views and listens because it's just becoming, and that goes back to those study skills. Just the brain organization, those types of things are becoming more and more lost because we aren't teaching, like you said, those study skills. And I think kids just feel like, I don't know how to do what you're asking me to do. I know the information, but it's so confusing to try to organize all this and get it into the output the way you want it. So that's awesome that you guys are teaching, those skills as part of your curriculum as well.
I think too, you hit a really important nail on the head that you're not cheating when you adapt the curriculum for your students. Because the end goal is for our kids to learn, right? We want them to really learn and understand. And so anytime you take a curriculum and you tweak it, whatever subject, whatever curriculum it is, and you change it or you modify it, you take something out, you add something to it, that's not cheating. That's, that's adapting it for your student. And we encourage parents to do that all the time. Take all of these things, and pull the resources from them that are the most helpful to you and your family and use those things. If something's not helpful, don't use it.
Right. That's empowering as a parent to hear, because a lot of times you look at the textbook or the curriculum and you're like, I've got to do it, step by step.
All the pieces.
Or I'm going to my child's going to miss out. And
Yeah. You don't have to do all the pieces.
You don't. You don't.
Yeah. They will survive somehow, It's like, it's like when I graduated my oldest, I looked at him and I'm like, no, I didn't teach you everything. And then got very, quickly kind of heard this voice in the back of my head. You don't know everything yet either. So just let him go. Oh, yes. Very humbling. So teaching science, especially, like hands-on and all of that, it sounds like a lot of work and a lot of mess. So what do you have to share with parents about, how it can be done and how it's worth a little mess, I guess, and the time, but really maybe how it can actually save them time?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the biggest tip I have is when you're looking at curriculums and programs that you might want to use, find something that already has it structured out for you. Because at least for me, like that's the worst, is like if I've got to kind of like put everything together and okay, I'm going to pull this from here and that from here. And, oh, what am I going to do with that lesson to reinforce that? If you can find a curriculum that has most of what you need, and again, you don't have to do every single lab, but if they at least have them laid out for you, they've got good instructions, good supply lists, know at the beginning of the year kind of what you're getting into. And you can sift through it and, say, oh, we're not going to do that one. That one's, too many supplies or going to take too, so toss that. Like I said before, don't feel like you have to do every single thing. But the more of those hands-on things you can pull in, I think having something that's laid out and structured ahead of time really takes a huge burden off of you as the parent who's homeschooling.
Yeah, for sure. And it's even better when you can find a curriculum that will show you, not just in written instructions of what to do, but sometimes video instructions can be just as good, if not better.
What can help kids be more independent?
Yes.
Exactly. Because if they can see it being done and then they can mimic what they've seen, it confirms to them, oh yeah, when the teacher did that and then there was this reaction that happened in the experiment, that's the same reaction I got. Okay, I know I did it right.
Yes.
If they're just seeing it written on a page, sometimes it's like, well, I think I did it okay, but I don't know. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But this is one of those, having the visual confirmation can be really helpful. Another thing that's really helpful for parents that really kind of decreases the clutter of doing labs is find a curriculum that provides either provides their own lab kits or links to lab kits, because that will, instead of going out and buying
every single week going, what do I need this week?
What do I need to buy?
Yes. Oh yeah. Been there, done that.
If you're only going to, for instance, in chemistry, if you're only going to use, this much of a particular chemical that year.
Right. Instead of buying the whole box. Yeah.
So for one, that just cuts down on the clutter, but it also saves you money too. If you're not buying all the stuff you don't need. And having a well-planned curriculum that's well laid out for you for that school year that kind of lists everything out. It's like, all right, this is what you need. If you get this, you're all set. Or for that matter, there's a lot of science courses that really make use of household items.
Yeah.
So whether that's elementary school doing sciencey kind of crafts or simple visuals that can be just like scissors and paper and poster board, and that's whatever stuff that you already have sitting around, maybe because they use it for so many other courses. That can really help too. Just not focusing on all the specialized supplies. You will need that for high school, but especially for younger ages, you probably don't need a lot of that.
Yeah, that is really helpful, because sometimes, but for those money saving people, it's like, yes, but I get the big box and then it'll last through all my kids. The problem is you forget where you put it and it doesn't last. So you've chucked it, or somebody's chucked it, or it's the back of a closet. You don't find it, you buy another one, and then you find the one you had before. So it really doesn't save you time, money, or sanity, I think, is what you lose the most of.
Oh, for sure.
So yes. But having all that pre-done for you, and especially in those age levels, is very helpful, because there are specific things that they're learning. And I do want to reinforce that video concept where they're just repeating, because my kids did science like that too. And they found it very reassuring when the video would show them something and then they'd say, oh yeah, this is what I got. And this is what was supposed to happen. And so it's like that, instead of that questioning and kind of feeling a little bit like a failure because you weren't sure if the answer was right or not, it was like, I did it, and then the learning sticks. We were talking about that, sticky learning before, and that reinforcement of I did it right makes it stick. Our brain wants to remember the things we do right. It wants to forget the things we're doing bad.
Right.
We don't always work that way, but that. So yeah. But, so there's labs, but then there's the abstract part of science, and it can kind of feel like we're getting our kids into college level courses, there's, like I said before, we had talked about vocabulary, and this is even in younger ages, terms and then formulas and concepts. How do you get kids engaged with that instead of just, like breezing through it in the textbook and going, well, we finished that chapter.
Right.
Yeah. But for them to really understand it.
Sure.
Yeah. I think, one of the things, especially with our like younger elementary age kids, is keeping those lessons short. But hitting those concepts frequently, but at short bursts, because we've got short attention spans. But not even just with the younger kids, but with even your high schoolers.
Yeah.
Hour-long lectures, that's their eyes are going to glaze over. Reading really difficult chapters in a chemistry textbook, their eyes are going to glaze over. So keep, really mind how much time you're spending on, especially some of those more heady things. I think when they're the real engaging things like the labs, you could go an hour, you could go 2 hours on some of those things because it's really engaging and fun. But when you're introducing some of those topics, sometimes shorter is better.
Yeah.
And in keeping that in mind, I would say that when it comes to concepts are not just learned by definition, term, here's your term, here's your definition, and there you go. Now now just memorize that. Well, okay, you can do that. However, and in fact, it's good for a parent to have a list of those terms way ahead of time.
Oh,
so So they know, okay, these are the terms that are coming up. That's fine. But find a curriculum that really engages students with lots of examples, lots of stories, stories that not just for the sake of grabbing their attention. There's that too, but stories often illuminate the concept, right? So, for instance, I remember we were teaching kids about bacteria and viruses. So I tell them the famous story of Typhoid Mary, and about how she had typhoid. She didn't know she had typhoid. She was a cook who worked and moved from house to house to house, completely not knowing that she was spreading typhoid everywhere. And as they hear the story of that, they're like, well, what's going to happen? How is she, she's killing people and she doesn't know it, and all this weird story, this crazy story. And all of a sudden now they're like, now tell me more about this virus or this bacteria that did this thing, and how do viruses work, and how does bacteria work, and why does it infect us, and why does it make us sick? Yeah, there's all kinds of great stuff you can learn about that. But that didn't just engage them. It was a good example of a concept that they were needing to learn about viruses, disease works. And so find curriculum that utilizes stories. If that could be done in video form, that could also be really fun because it tells the story in a more engaging way.
But again, that brings you back to living books too.
Yes.
It does.
Pulling in some of those books that you can integrate, like, okay, we're studying disease, okay, viruses, bacteria. Let's read some books about these different things, and it really displays, historical stories can really be very interesting to bring in.
We have one viewer who said, I hate teaching science and history and creative minds homeschooling. And I'd have to say, get back to those living books like Luke and Tricia are talking about, because I used to hate history. And when we added those living books, I was like, yes, this is relatable. I get it now. And that's kids really do. Then in all of us, we gravitate towards stories, and we want to know, just how is this affected other people, and why is this, again, it goes back to that question you were talking about before, Luke. What is this? Why does this matter to me?
What does this even matter?
Yeah. But if it's going to affect my livelihood, my health, and when kids realize, oh, this has like real meaning to me and my future, and, and how I interact with other people and all of this. And that's, it brings all learning to life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, that's So thank you, Creative Minds Homeschooling, for that that comment. I think a lot of people, as they homeschool, there's certain subjects maybe that we've had a past experience with, and we're like, no, I'm not gonna. But I'm not gonna even be able to tell my kids that this is a fun subject.
But if you know that about yourself,
yeah,
like science isn't my thing. This is the great thing about the age that we live in, is that we can find people who are passionate about those subjects. Mm-hmm. Now, for some people, that is let's join a co-op, because there is, I remember when we joined a local co-op, there was one of the teachers who came in for the co-op who was teaching science that year. He's a medical doctor.
Oh, wow.
And so
he was teaching anatomy to the high school kids, and that was really cool. Our kids weren't old enough, but
we're like, that's awesome. I'm totally jealous. I want to sit in on that class. Because, that'd be really fun to do. But that's the thing, though, is that for some people that's joining a co-op or doing doing a little homeschool pod where parents who have different subjects that they're really passionate about, they can do those things, or finding curriculum written by people who are passionate about those subjects. And even better, if it's a video curriculum, that you can see the passion. There's sort of a catch the infection of that passion. That's great. You have it. And if you know that about yourself, I don't like teaching science. Okay. But guess what? There's a lot of people who do love it.
And there's so many resources.
And there's so many things you can use to make it like, okay, you may not like it, but there's people who can make that fun for your kids.
We don't like art. And we have 12-year-olds, and they love art, all the projects, everything art. And so, we've had to find something. We've got a local art teacher in our community that does homeschool art classes on Fridays, and our kids go to that. And that's a great resource for our family. And I know I do a lousy job at teaching art.
Yeah, there are just some things that we're either not passionate about or we don't have the skills. And you need to give yourself the permission
as a parent. You need to give yourself permission to not be interested in everything. It's like,
you can't be an expert in everything. It's just not possible. I really think, to as homeschool parents, we have to remember our biggest job isn't just to teach every single subject and know everything and be passionate about everything, but to find our kids the best resources to do that and to engage them with the best resources that fit with their learning styles.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. It moves you more into that coach mode versus the teacher mode. And, when our kids are young, we're more in that teacher mode. But as our kids get older, we move more into that coaching mode.
Yep.
And in that, we just have to. I mean, I couldn't teach my son welding. I don't know how to weld, but I did find somebody that did. And, so yes. And the same thing with art too. And then they you were talking about before, Luke, they catch the passion of that person too.
Yeah.
And then that fuels their own passion instead of me getting in the way of saying, nope, you got to do it the way mom says. So Creative Minds Homeschooling says they love art. They just don't like science and history.
And outsource that one.
See, and that's where you swap. That's where you
have a pod and you swap. Yes, exactly. You find somebody that likes the opposite of you.
Right.
So we also have another question. Rebecca is watching on Facebook, and she said, can you share a good biology or history video course? So I know you guys have a biology course.
We do. We have an elementary biology and we have a high school biology course. So I love biology. And we have several history courses we've used as well. I can throw the names of those out. We've used Veritas Press's elementary history courses, and we've used Compass Classrooms has some history courses that we've really enjoyed in our house as well.
For sure.
Yeah, and Knotgrass has a good
upper level grades
programs too.
Let me take a moment to brag on this lady right here as far as our biology course, though, because there's not a lot of parents who want to get their hands dirty when it comes to doing dissections.
Mm-hmm.
But creating that portion of our biology course was so much fun because she was the one who got in there and got her hands dirty with every organism.
Oh wow!
And I'm the one filming everything from multiple camera angles. And what students get as a result of that is they're going to get a look at exactly what you're going to get when you dissect whatever that is, whether it's a starfish or a fetal pig or a worm or whatever it is. She's showing you exactly what it's supposed to look like, or what it's going to look like.
What you're kind of searching for, and like, what's that blob there? Like, I could say, okay, that's a heart, or that's a liver.
And a lot of that stuff we were filming was just it was just very much in real time. We were filming it, and when something didn't look quite right with the organism, we're like, oh, well, this is a little different than what you might see in other places. We got a fresh organism. Like, let me show you another thing, what it could look like. And the thing is that finding curriculum that does that can be really, really helpful for, especially for a student who's never even thought about, like, what you want me to cut into an animal and tell me
right. Written descriptions of that just don't always cut it.
No, they don't.
Yeah. Well, and it's good. Yeah. I actually refused to take biology in high school because I just thought it was so gross.
It's so much fun.
So I'm glad there's people like you. But yeah, if you're listening on the podcast and you want to find Luke and Trisha's curriculum, it's journeyhomeschoolacademy.com, and we'll be sharing that in the show notes as well, so that you can find that, and we'll share some more information kind of at the end about everything else that they have as well. Before you guys existed, there was the 101 series, and that's what my kids used. And we've loved their video-based program too, another passionate high school science program. But I'm excited to know there's different options now. So that's great. And
we did have so many subjects.
We did have another question sent in from a viewer ahead of time, and it was specifically biology. So I'd love to pull this in kind of to this time right now too. But Dusty asked, how can I teach biology to my daughter with a cognitive intellectual disability? So, they're just a little lower on, in understanding, processing, speed, that, what would you suggest for, maybe I would assume that this is, high school, because we're going subject specific usually, for a student who may need some, modifications, not just adaptions to the program?
That's a good question. So whether your child is struggling with, difficulty understanding new information, or maybe communication or social skills that, maybe hamper the learning, or even just slow processing time, that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's a number of things you can do. And this is true for a lot of subjects, but tying specifically to biology. First of all, find a curriculum that provides an outline of what will be taught.
Yes.
So this is, whether that is going to be useful for guided notes for them, or whether that's just something that you as the parent have ahead of time. Like, okay, this is what's coming up.
Right.
It kind of ties to when you teach teachers how to teach, they tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Right.
And it kind of goes with it. And that's true for all kinds of kids need that reinforcement. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So having that outline ahead of time can be very helpful. Okay, that's what this particular class is going to be about. Providing reading lists ahead of time, so that reading can start early. So if you're choosing a curriculum and you're like, okay, I know my kid's going to need like 50% longer reading these books than maybe the average kid is going to need. All right, well, if you get that thing ahead of time, now you can begin reading ahead of time on that. So if it's the textbook for biology, or if it's,
like we mentioned, an audiobook.
An
audiobook is an easier option. Or if you have a largely video-based curriculum, is it like, do you have to use the textbook?
Yeah,
right.
You might contact the company and say, is the textbook, like, do we have to use it? Because if you feel like everything's going in one ear out the other, is there a point in using that resource if it's not going to be helpful? We want to only use the resources that are truly going to be helpful.
Yeah. Another thing is it's good to find a curriculum that provides verbal and written instructions on labs. So if you get a biology lab, like what we were talking about with
like the dissections
or whatever.
I think for every kid, it's hard for a dissection to say, like, you're reading, make this cut here, make that cut there. That can kind of be like, you're looking at this thing going, okay.
You have to have a reference point to go from. And it's like,
and even a diagram, a sketch is just not the same as seeing it.
Right.
And I
remember
think especially with biology, a lot of biology, that is true, but a lot of biology labs being able to see those things.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I went to state school, government school. I went to public school growing up, and I remember taking a biology class. And when we get together in little groups, and whether it was to do a little experiment or to do a dissection or something like that, we always kind of like the teacher would kind of make the rounds around the room. And anytime the teacher wasn't there, we're like, are we doing this right? Are we doing this right? Here's the instruction right here. I don't know. Am I doing this right?
Right. Or you had that ringer in your group and everybody just let them do it.
Yeah, just let them do it. And I remember we used the same, I think it was a fetal pig. I remember we used that same animal like 5 times in that week as we're cutting. So by the end of the week, like their organs aren't in the right place. Nothing looks right. It's disgusting. But when the teacher was right there with our group saying, okay, now look at this and note this and stuff. We needed that verbal reinforcement of like, oh, okay, yes. Yep. Okay. I get it now. I don't feel like I'm going to screw this up. So having both written and verbal instructions is helpful. We already mentioned this, giving real life examples. Find a curriculum that gives those real life examples of whatever you're learning in the biology course. So
whether it's in a textbook that's bringing in examples and stories, or whether you're talking, integrating those living books again, or videos where they're telling stories, just to really engage the imagination and help hook it on to other concepts and things they might be familiar with.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Another thing to look for is, especially with cognitive ability issues, is sometimes it's really important to be aware of the use of color in a curriculum. So a lot of times, for instance, even if it's just like different words being highlighted different colors, that kind of thing. Just being aware of that when it comes to your own child, if that kind of thing helps them. For instance, I know in our videos, we have guided note taking. And so every time there's a word of a specific color on the screen, kids know I need to write that word down because that's the word that fills in the blank or whatever.
But that can be found in a variety of formats.
Yes,
if there's a textbook, sometimes textbooks use certain fonts or sizes or colors to denote these are important things for you to remember, and to sit down and say, okay, like, let's look at this curriculum ahead of time. And if you can prepare them ahead of time to know when we see these things, these are important concepts. So maybe we need to write these down in a notebook. Maybe we need to, what are we going to do with this to make sure we remember these things and that we remember that these are the important concepts.
Right.
I know we've seen this a lot with kids who take our courses. The nice thing about a recorded lecture is that you can, we'll have a number of students will do this, is they sit down, they watch the entire thing beginning to end, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. They sit down and watch the whole thing, and they just consume.
Listen, the first time through.
First time through, just listen. And just, okay, cool. Now you know where this thing went, where it's gone, now go back and watch it again. Now with your guided notes ready to go. Now you're going to take notes. And because you already kind of know where this is going, and now it's the repetition.
Right.
We can come back in and we're like, oh, okay.
I feel like stopping and starting in order to, so that's something
absolutely.
With if you're doing anything video.
That's why on demand, yes. And
consider watching it first without doing a bunch of pauses, because it can be distracting if you're trying to take notes and you keep pausing so you have time to write stuff down.
You can lose your train of thought and all of that.
Just watch it without writing anything down and then go back through it again. I think that can be a really helpful strategy for students.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, very good.
Hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hope so too. And I know I had told you ahead of time I wanted to talk a little bit about field trips. Well, let's do field trips specifically with biology.
Oh, yeah.
Just since we only have a couple minutes left, and that was kind of the question we were talking about. But where could parents take their students, even high school students, but younger as well, to reinforce those biology lessons?
So many places. I mean, you could just start where you live, and nature walks are a great way just to get outside. We've got kind of a little forested area near our house, and, my boys love going and exploring, and we'll just walk in the bugs and the trees and the leaves, and there's so much to see and so much to talk about. Right. In terms of that.
Zoos, aquariums, those kind of places are great for biology. So if you're learning about animals, if you're learning farms, yes. Yeah. We have like right down the road from us, and we've never even been, and I have to go. We have a alpaca farm down the road from us. And I'm like, I want to go there. I'm going to go see alpacas. So that kind of thing. Or even just very close to us, there's also there's a bird banding station that's for
yes. We've got a couple of boys that love going there.
Yes.
And they ask all the questions about the birds, and they learn what they do and how they're studying migration patterns at the banding station. And, but they let the kids, they'll put the birds in their hands and let the kids release them, and that's exciting.
Cool.
And
yes. Yep. And then you're getting them around people who are passionate about those things as well in each of the topic areas too.
Same thing with so if it's not animal life but plant life, greenhouses, arboretums,
gardens,
botanical gardens, those kind of things. And when you do those kind of field trips, one thing to keep in mind is if you've got a kid who's not quite interested in the subject, turn the field trip into some kind of gamify the field trip. Sometimes even like zoos or aquariums will provide this. They already have it. You have to look for it on their website or whatever, but they'll have free handouts for schools and school field trips, that kind of stuff. Make use of those things, because there'll be little things for your kids to be looking for. Find the animal here that does this or looks like this or whatever it is. If you gamify something, that's the thing, is because there are some kids that there are some subjects that they will just not be interested in, no matter how passionate you are about it.
Right, exactly.
But if you turn it into a game, and the kid at least wants to win the game, they're like, okay,
exactly.
So I at least want to win a game, so I will be interested in this for sake of this game. Great. Do that, use that. So make use of, try to gamify things for kids when they're doing that, because that's really fun for them. National parks, another great place to go.
Sometimes learning too comes at some kind of unexpected locations. So, for instance, now we went there intentionally because of this, but I could see happening upon something like this very unintentionally. Mackinac Island in Michigan, very northern part of the Lower Peninsula. There's little islands, and that is where Dr. Beaumont was, and he was the first person who really discovered that digestion happens through digestive acids, and there is some mechanical process to it, but prior to that, they thought it was all mechanical, that they didn't know anything about digestive acids or anything like that. So, we went on a trip there to film on location, but you can learn about the stories of some of these historical discoveries that happened in places like that. And that story is fascinating. There was someone in the military who got shot in the stomach, and they didn't think he was going to live, but Dr. Beaumont saved him, but he had a hole in his stomach.
Right.
That never closed. Never closed for
and
decades.
So that's how he discovered how is this guy digesting food?
This guy
look and watch.
This guy the doctor literally would have this guy eat food, and then he would get down at belly level of this guy and watch his stomach digest food from the outside of his body, because this guy had this freaky, medical condition.
But that's some of those places where, people don't go to Mackinac Island to learn science.
Right.
They go there
vacation or
they go on the little cart and cart and horse ride, and they go there to eat fudge, and it's a cute, quaint little island. But
if you keep your eye out for, we're going on vacation or we're going on a trip or whatever, is there something in this area that's significant that ties to what curriculum we're learning?
Studying. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. That's great advice. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm so sorry to have to say we're done. Creative Minds Homeschooling said that the Science Museum in Minnesota used to do dissections on a regular basis, and then you could show up.
Great.
She said they even did a squirrel. So there may be places like that where you can get those live ones too. But as we're wrapping up, can you just share a little bit about your business, your curriculum, so families know how to find you, and then also know that in the show notes for the video as well as the podcast, I'll put these hyperlinks in too that that Luke and Tricia are going to share with us.
Yeah.
You can go to journeyhomeschoolacademy.com. That's our main website where all of our courses can be found. And we've got courses for kids of all ages, awesome. Elementary, middle school, high school, elementary school classes, like, for instance, for like biology or earth science or those kind of topics. A lot of those courses are very much about piquing your kids' interest in the sciences, about just getting them excited about the sciences. So it's all about, it's not about diving deep into specific topics necessarily, even though we do that. It is all about generating that excitement in science. Middle school courses and high school courses, we really start to delve into really specific, specific areas where, like astronomy, chemistry, physics, earth science. Right. We really do deep dives in those subjects. High school especially, they're great college prep courses in terms of, their honors level courses.
And we've already mentioned it, but our courses are largely video based.
Yes.
And they're not just talking head videos, because one of the things we found is, like, again, students' eyes glaze over.
Oh, yeah.
Very rich visuals in the video courses, and Luke does the video editing and does an amazing job with bringing those visuals in to really demonstrate what are we talking about.
Right.
We love doing a lot of for a lot of things in our courses. We love doing a lot of filming on location, or for that matter, even just telling great stories about the development of science. One of the things we're very passionate about in our own curriculum is tying it in, of course, to our Christian worldview.
Yeah.
We, as Christians, we feel it's really important for kids to see how all subjects integrate, and especially how, in our case, how theology and science pair together.
Absolutely.
So we're constantly talking about that, as well as how it integrates with history and pop culture and literature and everything else.
Yes.
So our courses are really designed for that kind of
so if there's any interest, we've got free previews. You can go watch some video lessons.
Yeah, and you shared a link with me there too, so I'll share that in the description too. So that's awesome. Yeah, something that I always recommend. Try it out. There's always something free. Yeah. And then, like you had said earlier, you had talked about just in general, but call them. Ask them questions, send them an email. The more that I get to know curriculum developers, they're like, but we wish more people would just ask the questions and let us know, what their struggle is, so we can help them figure out a solution.
Absolutely.
We have some awesome customer service gals who we've got some who have taught in the classroom and have taught with different learners and students that have had some learning difficulties, and they've interfaced with a lot of our students and families already. Awesome. And often have really good suggestions. So if you write in and say, here's what my student struggles with. If we decided to take this course, what would you recommend? And they've got awesome recommendations. We've talked with them over the years too, and given them different recommendations and tweaks. Right. And if there's ever a question that's over their head, then it gets sent to us and we'll answer it.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Luke and Tricia. I appreciate your willingness to share. And this was an incredible hour and very encouraging and filled with so much enthusiasm. Blessings on you guys and your work. I'm excited to see where it's going to go and this new curriculum you're working on now, just to add to all the other things that you've done. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. Creative Minds Homeschooling, haven't seen you in a while. Kara Sue, you haven't been here in a while either. I'm excited. And then Rebecca, thanks for popping on with a question as well. And for Dusty for sharing that question ahead of the show. We appreciate that. And we just want to be here to support you. So check out our resources at SPADHomeschool.com. And we hope that you will join us for another show. Next episode, I will be on vacation. So Leilani Melendez who's been a guest many times and has her own YouTube channel. She's going to be hosting the show next the week of July 4th. And then I'll be back at the end of the month and I'm hosting 3 shows in a row. But next month is, we just wrapped up all the curriculum adaptations this month. Next month is SPED Homeschool Awareness. So we're going to share stories from veteran homeschoolers who have been through the trenches and have wisdom to share with you. So you're going to want to hold on for those stories and how they've gone from the valleys of homeschooling into new heights. And so we're excited to share that with you and to encourage you on your journey in homeschooling your struggling learner. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks again, Luke and Tricia, and we'll see you again next time. God bless everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Often we believe our questions mean we don't have faith, but I believe Jesus loves our questions. Our questions are windows into heaven. I'm Caden Fabrizio, and on the Questions with Caden podcast, we ask and answer one question per episode as relevantly and biblically as possible. Questions about fear, anxiety, depression, addiction, and so much more. Don't worry, your questions, they're not going to scare Jesus, so ask away. Listen and subscribe now at lifeaudio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.